Welcome to the Six Hats podcast, where I, Dr. Shami, a lifestyle and nutritional medicine family doctor, will talk about how women strive to find balance each day by juggling their six roles, being a woman, mother, daughter, partner, business owner, and professional. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Six Hats podcast. And I'm really excited to have Gina Claxton back with us. Dr. Gina Claxton is an amazing clinical psychologist here in Melbourne. And we did a wonderful podcast, I think it was in last season, and it was all about the neuroscience of trauma. And I have to say the feedback was phenomenal. I had so many patients come back to me saying, now I get it. Now I understand what's happening to my mind and why am I feeling that way. So Gina, welcome back.
Hello, Shami. Nice to be back.
Yeah. So moving on from that, I would love for you to do a quick recap from the first podcast. So for those who've just joined us, they'll have a better understanding.
Yeah, sure. Because the other thing too was lots of my patients also loved listening to the podcast and listened to it multiple times. And lots of my doctor friends have shared it with their patients too. And so it's resonating with a lot of people. There was a lot of information to take in, and I don't want people to get sort of stuck or caught up on big words, Shami, or unfamiliar terminology. So really just breaking it down in a nutshell, it's about how we read and understand what's going on with our nervous system. And then once we tune into what the nervous system is telling us, we can then learn to reconnect within our bodies and then learn to regulate what's going on for us emotionally. So I'll do the big quick recap. And that means that the nervous system that we're talking about is called the autonomic nervous system, and that is below the brain. So it's at the base of the brain down. And it's made up, as I said, don't worry about the terminology, just whatever you want to call it. But we're talking about the sympathetic nervous system, which regulates adrenaline, and the parasympathetic, which downregulates it. And the parasympathetic is our body's natural calming technique. So our bodies innately know how to wind down and how to manage and deal with stress when it's functioning in a healthy way. So the parasympathetic is really, it's broken down into when it can regulate and function, and that's called the ventral vagus, because remember the vagus nerve makes up the parasympathetic, and the vagus nerve, it's all over social media at the moment, but that means it's a big cranial nerve that starts in your brain, goes down through your face, your heart, your lungs, and ends in your gut. And that's why we have that gut-brain axis, which everybody's familiar with, and also that we have a lot of the physiological symptoms that people experience in anxiety related to the heart rate, the way the heart regulates, the way the breathing can accelerate or deaccelerate, and the way the tummy holds stress and becomes turned up or then has more sort of serious complex problems. So a lot of those physiological responses of anxiety are happening because the parasympathetic isn't regulated and isn't able to do its job. So there's really just three states of the nervous system. And sorry, I started to say that the parasympathetic is made up of two branches because the vagus nerve is divided into two branches. And when it can do its job, it's called the ventral vagus, which is our safe, regulated state. Hopefully it becomes our baseline. And then when it's dysfunctional or when it's dysregulated, more defensive, then it's called the dorsal vagus, which is that shutdown retreat state. And if you've worked with me, we refer to it as the turtle state. So the three basic states in very simple terms are it's safe or it's fearful or it's dangerous. And that's the response, right? So if it's in a safe state, the mind is curious, it's exploratory. Because we're regulated, we can access a range of emotions from happiness to sadness to anger. We can also access fear and anxiety states, but regulate them and work through them. So that's the safe state. And that's the state that we always want to orient back to, called the ventral vagus, or call it whatever you want. The second state is the sympathetic nervous system's, what I call that fear state. And it's when the nervous system is picking up signals of danger, when it's not feeling safe. when it's feeling fear. And that's not necessarily a physical fear, could be fear of criticism, rejection, whatever the fear is. The nervous system is picking up uncertainty. When it feels really under threat, Shami, then it goes into a survival mode and signals to the adrenals to release adrenaline and cortisol, which everybody knows about as the fight, flight, freeze state. And then that's a fight state, fight getting drawn into drama and stress and anger, and the flight is wanting to run away, and the freeze is in between. What am I going to do? My fight, flight. And that state I call fear. And then the bottom state, because if we look at it as a hierarchy, it's a ladder. It goes safe, fear, and then danger is the bottom state. And this is when that shutdown state happens, when everything is overwhelming and overloading to the point of it's so many demands. I've got nothing left in reserve. So it's kind of like the nervous system gives you some sort of respite and it shuts down, meaning that you go into yourself, you withdraw and you use all your internal resources and energy just to exist. Now, the social engagement system is off in that state. And so your emotional brain is off in that state. And as we know, it's what we call psychological numbing. And in both of those last two states that I just referred to, so either in the fight, flight, freeze or in the turtle shutdown state, the way I've just described them is when the nervous system becomes in a defensive state, right? In a survival state. And the problem is that these states take over. And that's what we want to talk about in a minute. But when they're in survival state and defensive state, the nervous system cannot regulate itself. So what we want to do is work towards always orienting back to safety, that ventral state, using that ventral energy to then come into the other states. Because you don't have to be like curled up in a ball to be in those states. You can use sympathetic energy, which is that arousal, that rise in energy to deal with challenges, to deal with stressful situations, to deal with difficult emotions, but you're regulating, you see? And so you don't have to dip right into survival, fight, flight, freeze. Same with dorsal. You can use that lovely dorsal energy when you've been working really hard or you've had a full-on week and you want to just decompress and recalibrate and reset and rest instead of just dysregulating. You're using it to just have some time out and, again, orienting back to that sense of safety to be able to do so. Does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely, Gina. And what I really want to say is I was so aware of, yes, that fight or flight response and yes, safety, but I wasn't aware of that dorsal vagus, that turtle shutdown, numbing. Yeah. And it actually explains a lot. And now I use that terminology for my patients because when are turning towards, say, for example, emotional eating, alcohol, numbing behaviors, they get a much better understanding of what state they're in. And it is a survival mechanism because it's easy, for example, a doctor say, right, what are you doing about alcohol? How are you going to stop? Or even, emotional eating, how are you going to address it? It's very easy to go, just stop. But actual fact, it's much deeper than that. And I know we have great conversations about it. It's much deeper, much more complex than just saying stop.
Yes, because what we know is if we can go through those states of the nervous system with people and with our patients and put them into the state so they can actually experience what the physiological responses are in their body, and then we move them in and out through the imagery of what's your landscape for ventral. It could be like chilling and having dinner with friends and the differences in your body there compared to sitting at your desk with a million emails to respond to and all the demands that creates the stress response compared to the turtle state the dorsal state when you're just like feeling very alone and disconnected. And now we know. So we can move through our states and explain to people, yes, that's your biology, right? It's your biology. It's not you. It's not who you are in terms of your personality. So they're not fixed states. However, there are some sort of psychological components, meaning there will be interpretations, there will be the way in which people make sense of the world and what the meaning is for them in those states that keeps them stuck. So now what happens is we have to unpack what the stories are for each of the states, because the stories then get relived and reactivated on a neural level, which I want to go into, but then those stories make the biology become stuck. It's unbelievable. Like the story of dorsal or the story of sympathetic makes the person unable to move out of those states.
Wow.
Do you want me to explain that a bit more?
Absolutely. Or whether we go down the pathway of safety and we talk more about how do we create safety, but should we go down that path?
Yes, but that all links together, Shami. They're both connected to what I was wanting to talk about anyway. So here we need to talk a little bit about early development, right? And it's just a natural phenomena for a child to want to connect and want to bond with their parent. And yeah, it's an innate mechanism that goes on. You seek proximity, you seek love, nurturing, want to be cared for, want to feel safe. And parents, do the best that they can for the most part, and they do what they know. Sometimes it's generational, it's cultural, and, there's limitations or they're repeating cycles. And so in that sense, if there's consistency, if there's, routine, if there's stability, if there's security, then that leads to like a sense of secure attachment. You've heard that I've got to speak in very simple terms, but also it's so much more complex. So I'm just really just going to touch the surface on this. But like that sort of security lasts throughout life, right? And it's safe. You have a safe environment. You feel safe to express yourself and to really develop your own beliefs and feelings. But when there's inconsistency and when there's environments that are unstable, or they can range from a parent that is unavailable, absent, dismissive, could be critical, could be disapproving, and a range right through to aggressive and explosive, to abusive and to very traumatic experiences that take place in that early environment. Then the sense of security is compromised, and the child will always it's not a choice. It's just, again, a natural phenomena that the child will always align with the parent, right? And in doing so, because they want to seek that connection and that bond and that attachment, the attachment is wrought with anxiety. So we have anxious attachment because the fear is you attach to the parent that you love, but you also fear rejection, fear abandonment, fear feeling alone, fear disapproval. And so that sense of safety never really gets established because the child unwittingly chooses to align with the parent. In doing so, again, not a conscious choice, doesn't choose themselves. So then they never learn to really connect with their own sense of safety, which is their own sense of authenticity, meaning they're not safe to really connect with what they're feeling or develop what they're thinking and what their beliefs are, right? There's a disconnect that happens straight away to sometimes the only safe thing to do, Shami, is to disappear into yourself or into your body, which we know as dorsal. Sometimes the only safe thing to do is to learn to please and appease and placate. And don't show what you think and sort of say what you think or show what you feel. It's not safe to do so without conditions, without disapproval or rejection. And then this goes on through life. That what's fundamentally happened is that the child has never learnt to develop their own core sense of self, which is the safety of developing the true essence of who you are in your authentic self, in your own authenticity. So then you might go through your life being, like we all hear this said in lay terms, but people pleasing. And the mechanism there is that you don't feel safe to actually show your true self, true colours.
Is it sort of similar to even perfectionism traits?
Well, yes, perfectionism, and then is because of the anxiety, is the thinking style, which is a cognitive symptom of anxiety. But people learn to go above and beyond to overcompensate, right? And because
Service, almost over service, give too much.
yes, that's the story I find, the most common story of sympathetic, right? So the child learns to read the room, learns to read the parent's reaction. And in order to avoid an explosion or a criticism or a disapproval, they try and construct to be best version, give 110%. You see these people that really seek for high achieving academically or in work, but it's always like, now you feel responsible for the parent. First the parent, then your friend, then your colleagues, then your family, then your partner, and the burden of responsibility you take on. And so it's always like all roads, this is a common story, all roads lead back to me, right? Carry the weight of the world on my shoulder, but it's always go, 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 go. And they're always trying to find new challenges and new things and problem solving and never stopping to take in their accomplishments and their achievements, because it's like, what's next? And it's never enough. And it's just like, yeah, it's a constant theme of doing. And yeah, always trying to either avoid letting people down or feeling like they can't let people down, and so they have to do everything themselves. And they might attract partners which also need to be cared for and looked after. And so then that adds to the weight of the world on their shoulders. And they're reliving the same story over and over again in their workplace, in their family life, in their personal, professional, romantic lives. And this goes on and on for decades that we don't even realize. That's the sympathetic nervous system in overdrive. It's in autopilot and it's dysregulated. You don't stop until you get to a point, I think, where the signals go, it's burnout, it's overloaded, it's burnout, and it's really the nervous system gets fried, if you like. And it then becomes very hard to rebound sometimes and bounce back into that functional state of the nervous system.
How you described it resonates with so many of my listeners. This is the story that I hear day in, day out, even in my clinic, because there's a story of stress, and it's chronic stress, and it's leading to physical symptoms. And it's really interesting because when you come to the doctor, you present the physical symptoms, but now, it's connecting the dots to the years and years of chronic stress. And how you described it was just classic of overservicing, people pleasing, doing too much, never stopping, always in that fight or flight stage or even dorsal state, and how it sort of comes out. And just to give you an idea for our listeners, it could even be weight gain, insomnia, which is difficulty sleeping, gut issues, thyroid issues, mental health issues. So when you do go and see a doctor, they only look at the physical, but never connecting the dots to all those years of chronic stress. And that's something I just needed to add in there.
Yes, because then what happens with the overload of years and years of that cortisol, let's say overload, addiction, whatever you want to call it, that then the nervous system says time, right? Time out. And if we drop into that dorsal state, it's a state of your body is telling you and screaming out, I've got nothing left in my tank. I'm burnt out to the point that I can't deliver anymore. There's too much output and not enough input. And in the dorsal state, again, this state has its own story, and the very common themes here. The world is untrustworthy, or bad things happen in the world. I can't trust people. I can't rely on people. I have to be self-sufficient. I'm all alone. This is my life. This is what it's got to. I've always had this struggle, and therefore I'm never going to get better. No matter how much treatment and therapy I've had, nothing can help me. And it takes over. So Shami, what happens here is that we have to help people get back in touch and reconnect to, as I said, that authentic sense of self. And you do that through the body, which is why I'm saying bottom up, to reconnect back into your body, anything that's body-based through things like emotion-focused therapy techniques like grounding, takes you back into your body, anything like yoga, anything that makes you connect back into your body, helps you then connect back into the safety mechanism of that nervous system when it can do its job, to be regulated, to be grounded, to have clarity. And then we can work on recreating or rewriting the story that is more healthy and functional, and it's safe to come out of the turtle shell. It's safe to take your foot off the pedals with the sympathetic, the fight or flight state. So many people then in the dorsal state, as you're talking to me about people with the weight and dietary issues that they've had all their life. They've struggled with weight. They've struggled with alcohol, that drugs, or nowadays TikTok or any phone surfing or, Netflix binging where you're numb. See what this is. All of these things are inanimate. They're not interpersonal. So what's happened is these things have become the secure base because now they don't have demands. They don't want anything back from you in return, right? You don't have to deliver. You don't have to deliver anything of yourself. So it's soothing and it's numbing. However, because of addictive nature of sugar in alcohol, sugar in processed high sugary foods, that might be the story of, oh, well, I know what I'm getting when I eat a packet of Tim Tams or have a couple of bottles of red. You know that you're getting that warm, fuzzy feeling initially, and you know that you're getting that let's say, de-stressor initially, but then it's followed by another story. And the story comes from the sugar high, which is then definitely giving you a high anxiety and depressive sort of intensity. And then we have different interpretations and stories there, related to self-loathing, self-criticism, not good enough, never enough, nothing's going to help me, nothing's going to change. And here I go, I'm stuck again in that story because the addictive nature of those behaviours are problematic in and of themselves. So we really have to get back in touch with feeling safe again to be able to experience that in your body. I've had people that tell me they haven't cried for years. And as soon as we do grounding work, all the tears flood. And did you know that, a lot of our patients will speak about, I'm always in my head. I'm always overthinking. I just want those thoughts to stop. I just want to stop ruminating. I just want to stop reliving every conversation I've had and every interaction I've had because I'm just always in my head and I'm always anxious. Well, you know what? That's only 20% of the information that you have access to. 20% is coming from your brain, which means 80% is held in your body. All of that in your body. That's your emotional memory. It's your autonomic nervous system. As I said, brainstem down. So it's all held in the body. And the body has got all the information to unlock all of this. And so if there's 80% of the information in your body, but you're living in your head, shoulders up, imagine the disconnect. Such a disconnect.
How you're missing out as well.
Yeah, well, you don't know how to connect with yourself, therefore you can't connect with others. And this is the whole thing of what safety is all about.
This is amazing. I was just about to say, Gina, should we define what safety means?
Should we define what
safety means? Because it's really interesting we use that term. And you made a really good point when we chatted about this podcast. Do we know what safety means?
No, I think that we just assume that we're centered or stable, I think we know when we're not. I think we know we're not. But safety means having the ability to connect in a regulated and stable way, to be in touch with what you're feeling, what you're thinking, and to feel safe not only to be able to access that and experience that, but to be able to express it without the nervous system picking up, oh, this is a cue of danger. It's a cue, it's feeling unsafe. And if it does, it takes you into sympathetic or extreme into dorsal.
Right.
Yeah. So does that kind of make sense? And as I said earlier on, with attachment styles and the way in which we learn to relate to our parents and then to people and then to the world in general, that's where safety gets defined. And when it's compromised, it's the nature of trauma and attachment trauma.
Got it.
So really about connecting back into your body where the nervous system knows how to regulate and knows how to be in its ventral state, its natural state, the state that we're born into. And when we're faced with the challenges and the fears and the very difficult things, that we come back into the ventral state in a regulated way, as I said, rather than in a defensive or survival instinct way.
Amazing, Gina. So do we want to sort of move on to your process? How do you create safety? How do you work with your client to get to the...
I always say to people, even like with my patients in their 80s, I have a kind of therapeutic mother role in a sense to reparent, because we have to rework attachment styles, right? So when they've had anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, you're not going to let people into your bubble. So I have to say, you have to let me into your bubble at some point. So building trust is very heavily weighed into the therapeutic alliance, Shami. Therapeutic relationship is loaded in neuroscience, and it's never about having a conversation. And as we've discussed before, if we're just going to talk and get your whole trauma history and repeat your trauma, and then you relive it and you reactivate that sense of danger and not feeling safe, you're in a state of hypervigilance and hyperarousal, and now you have to leave the session and function in that state, which you can't. So what we're doing is in building trust, building safety, that we can connect to that part of the nervous system. And sometimes it's through co-regulation using my nervous system, which is in a regulated state, and it's in ventral state. And we use my nervous system to regulate their nervous system. So ventral to ventral, that's what we're aiming to do, so that they feel safe. And when they do so, we can access those painful emotions or memories as they come into the sessions, like as they become relevant to the person's, what's happened in the week, for instance, that's upset them or distressed them. And as we do that, we've built the therapeutic alliance is the best indicator of any outcome, no matter what modality you're trained in. If we don't have therapeutic alliance and that sense of safety in the therapeutic space, in the therapeutic relationship between therapist and patient, we can't achieve any of those outcomes to be able to treat depression, to treat anxiety, to integrate unprocessed trauma slowly and gradually. So first it starts with that. So even anytime I'm talking, I'm never just chatting. I'm always assessing, where are you in your nervous system? Where are you in your body? What's the cue of safety? What's the cue of danger? Like why, what's the block? You see? And then when we do that, then we can do our grounding techniques, which then help people bottom up, get in touch with their own internalized sense of safety, which we all have. And that's the process. And then in doing so, there will be a lot of emotional distress, outpouring of emotion, anger. It might get transferred back onto me, the therapist, as the blank slate. And I'm just representing therapists in general here, but as the blank slate to then be able to say, oh, well, this is that story, that pattern, that interpretation. You're assuming that I'm judging you or I'm disapproving of you or you've let me down or whatever it is. And so we use what's happening in session and we edit there and then. And that's how we rewire the brain, how we create new neural pathways. Because I think I said earlier on in the session that the neural clusters get stored at the time that they occur. So I might have an interaction with my parent at 9, may not have heard or felt validated or supported the way I wanted to. I've then interpreted that I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I have to be perfect in order to be noticed or loved or visible. I feel angry, but I can't express that. I feel sad, but there's nowhere for me to cry. So all those emotions, all those interpretations, and whatever the traumatic experience or interaction has occurred gets stored at the time that it happened. Then if we go through the anxious brain through our lives, through our decades, then the cortex, which it gets flooded with adrenaline and cortisol, can't do its job, and it can't update those neural clusters because it shrinks in the anxiety cycles. And so when it doesn't get updated, if the buzzword trigger, if we get triggered in our current interaction, somebody like talks over us, for instance, and it triggers an intense angry response, it means that same neural cluster from the age of 9 or whatever it is, has been reactivated, and you relive exactly the same thought trains, the same emotional responses, the same interpretations, the same story, and it directs straight to the anxious brain or the depressed brain. So in doing emotion-focused therapy, in learning about regulating the nervous system through the neuroscience model, Shami, We are changing pathways, and the brain reprograms itself 4 times a night through REM sleep cycles. So that's the work from the psychologist's point of view. But then, as you know, I'm creating this program that works with all of you, integrative doctors, integrative practitioners, that are looking at the other components to this. Because how do we, I'm saying, like, okay, we're trying to work on recreating safety, but then why are you still eating if I say keto, carnivore diets, why can't people bring themselves to do so? Because of those blocks. What's happening let's say on a genetic basis? Have you got the gene that doesn't break down adrenaline and noradrenaline, for instance, and therefore are you experiencing anxiety a lot more intensely? Is that a contributing factor? Is, as we've already alluded to, the diet, the sugary foods, we absolutely know keep people stuck in the cycles that we just said and the stories repeating. What nutrient deficiencies that are taking place that because of you're not getting the food that you need to get from, as you know, your high protein diets, animal-based diets. All of these things are interrelated. So we can't just work standalone. You have to work with all of those things interrelating and consecutively.
Absolutely.
And that's why I have not lost passion after all these years. I mean, it's just so much to say, not enough time, but
I was just going to say, we probably have to come
wind up
towards the end of the podcast, but another amazing conversation, Gina, and I feel we have to bring you back again and have more talks. But do you know what it is? It's giving people so much hope. And I think if it hasn't worked for you, I think it's worth exploring this in a different way, and exactly what you're doing, Gina. And it's working together, looking at nutrients, nutrition, lifestyle, but also the rewiring of the brain. And that gives so much hope. And when I chat to patients about it, such a smile comes onto their face, and they can actually see themselves get better. So, this is awesome. Thank you so much for your amazing work.
No problem, Shami. Good to talk to you.
Remember that this is general advice only. Please see your healthcare professional for more information. So what's your take-home message today? Remember, it's all about progress and not perfection. And are you suffering from stress? Visit the Usawa Learning Hub on usawa.com.au for more resources on how to de-stress, re-energize, and reclaim your health. Enjoy the journey.